I woke up earlier than usual that morning, long before the sun had fully risen. The house was quiet, wrapped in that soft stillness that comes just before the day begins. For a moment, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the dinner I had planned. It had been months since my son and his wife last visited, and even though we spoke occasionally on the phone, it wasn't the same. There was a distance now, something unspoken that I couldn't quite name. Still, I held on to hope that this dinner might bring us closer again. I got up and went straight to the kitchen. Cooking had always been my way of expressing love, and today I poured everything into it. I prepared his favorite dishes, the ones he used to beg for as a child. The rich aroma of spices filled the house as I stirred the pot slowly, remembering how he would run into the kitchen years ago, asking when dinner would be ready. Back then, his eyes would light up just at the smell of food. Back then, things were simple. As I chopped vegetables and arranged ingredients, my mind drifted to his wife. She had never been openly rude, but there was always a coldness in her presence, something polite yet distant. I had tried many times to connect with her, to treat her like a daughter, but every attempt seemed to fall flat. Still, I told myself that relationships take time. Maybe tonight would be different. By afternoon, the table was set perfectly. I brought out my best plates, polished the glasses, and even placed fresh flowers in the center. It looked beautiful, almost like a celebration. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was preparing for something more serious than just a family dinner. When the doorbell finally rang, my heart skipped a beat. I smoothed my clothes and opened the door with a smile. My son stood there, but instead of the warm embrace I expected, he gave me a quick, distracted hug. His wife followed with a polite greeting, her smile thin and practiced. We sat down to eat, and at first, everything seemed normal. We talked about small things: his job, the weather, some news. I laughed when I was supposed to laugh, nodded when I was supposed to nod. But something felt off. My son barely looked at me, and his wife kept exchanging glances with him, as if they were waiting for the right moment. Halfway through the meal, the conversation began to slow. The clinking of spoons against plates grew louder in the silence. Then my son cleared his throat, and I felt a chill run through me. "Mom, we need to talk about something important." The words hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. My hands froze on the table, and I slowly looked up at him. I had heard that tone before, the careful, hesitant way he spoke when something wasn't right. I forced a small smile, trying to keep things light. "What is it?" But inside, I already knew. Something was coming. Something that would change everything. They exchanged a glance before speaking, as if rehearsing the moment in their heads. Then his wife leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but deliberate. She began explaining their situation in detail, talking about financial problems, unexpected expenses, and investments that hadn't gone as planned. She spoke smoothly, almost too smoothly, like someone presenting a case rather than sharing a struggle. My son sat quietly beside her, nodding occasionally, still avoiding my eyes. That hurt more than her words. He had always been open with me before. Now it felt like he was hiding behind her. I listened without interrupting, though each word tightened something inside my chest. I had helped them before more than once. Every time they promised it would be the last, and every time I believed them. I wanted to believe them again, but something felt different now. Finally, she reached the point. "We need your help," she said, her tone soft but firm. There it was. I looked at my son, hoping he would say something more, explain in his own words, reassure me. But he just sat there, silent, letting her speak for both of them. "How much?" I asked quietly. They hesitated for a moment, and that hesitation told me everything. Then she named the amount. It wasn't small. It wasn't something you asked for lightly. "We'll pay it back soon," she added quickly. Soon. The word echoed in my mind. I had heard it before, and soon had never really meant soon. Still, he was my son. That bond doesn't disappear just because trust starts to crack. "I need time to think," I said carefully. Her smile flickered for a moment, almost as if she didn't expect that answer. My son finally looked at me, but there was something uneasy in his expression. "Of course," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. The conversation shifted after that, but the warmth never returned. Everything felt forced, like we were all pretending nothing had just happened. I got up and made tea, hoping to soften the tension, to bring back some sense of normalcy. As I moved around the kitchen, I could feel her eyes following me. When I returned with the tray, I noticed how she looked around the room, her gaze lingering on things she had seen many times before: my cabinets, the old safe in the corner, even the drawer where I kept important documents. It made me uneasy, though I couldn't explain why. We drank tea in near silence. My son kept checking his phone, barely participating in the conversation. His wife asked a few polite questions, but her attention seemed elsewhere. When they finally stood to leave, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. This wasn't the evening I had hoped for. At the door, she hugged me tightly, more tightly than usual. "Thank you for everything," she said softly. The words sounded kind, but something about them didn't feel genuine. After they left, the house felt emptier than before. I sat at the table, staring at the untouched dishes, replaying the evening in my mind. Every word, every glance, every pause. Something wasn't right. And I couldn't shake the feeling that the dinner had only been the beginning of something far worse. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness that refused to fade. The memory of the dinner lingered in my mind like a shadow, replaying itself in fragments: the tone of their voices, the careful way they had chosen their words, the silence that followed. I tried to push it aside, telling myself that I was overthinking, that maybe I was just being overly sensitive. But deep down, something didn't sit right. I went about my usual routine, making tea, tidying up the house, trying to return to normal. But normal felt distant. Even the smallest things seemed off, like the house itself had absorbed the tension from the night before. As I sat down with my cup of tea, a thought suddenly crossed my mind, sharp and unexpected. My bank account. I hadn't checked it in a few days. Normally, I was careful, always keeping track of my finances. But with everything going on, I had neglected it. At first, I almost dismissed the thought. There was no reason to worry, or at least, that's what I told myself. Still, the unease grew stronger. I walked to my room, sat down in front of my laptop, and turned it on. My hands moved automatically, typing in my login details. The screen loaded slowly, each second stretching longer than it should. When the account finally opened, my eyes went straight to the balance. For a moment, I didn't understand what I was seeing. The number looked wrong. Too small. Far too small. My heart began to pound as I leaned closer to the screen, refreshing the page, hoping it was some kind of error. But the number didn't change. A large sum of money was gone. Completely gone. My breath caught in my throat as I scrolled down to the transaction history. There it was: multiple withdrawals, all made the previous night. The same night as the dinner. My hands started to tremble, the cursor shaking slightly as I moved it across the screen. I tried to think logically, to find some reasonable explanation. Maybe it was a bank mistake. Maybe there had been some kind of technical issue. But deep down, I already knew. There were no mistakes. Only actions. And those actions had been taken by someone who had access. Someone I trusted. The realization hit me like a wave, heavy and suffocating. Years ago, I had shared my banking details with my son. It had seemed harmless at the time, just a precaution, a way for him to help if I ever needed it. I never imagined that trust would be used against me. I sat there in silence, staring at the screen, trying to process what had happened. My mind raced through every possibility, every scenario, but they all led to the same conclusion. They had taken it. Without asking. Without waiting. Without even telling me. The conversation from the night before echoed in my mind. "We need your help." "I'll think about it." They hadn't waited for my answer. Tears welled in my eyes, but they didn't fall. The shock was too strong, too immediate. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what it meant. Trust, broken so easily. I closed the laptop slowly, my hands still shaking. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at nothing, trying to steady my breathing. Then, with a sudden surge of determination, I reached for my phone. I needed answers. I dialed my son's number first. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Then I called his wife. She answered almost immediately. Hello, her voice was calm, almost too calm. My bank account, I began, struggling to keep my voice steady. Money is missing. Do you know anything about it? There was a pause. A long, deliberate pause. Then she spoke. You should talk to your son. And before I could say another word, the line went dead. I stared at the phone in disbelief, my grip tightening around it. The silence that followed was louder than anything she could have said. In that moment, the truth became undeniable. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was betrayal. And it had come from the very people I had invited into my home, into my life, and into my trust. The hours that followed felt endless. I sat in the same place, my phone resting in my hands, waiting for it to ring. Every minute that passed without a call only made the situation more real, more painful. I tried calling my son again, but each attempt ended the same way, silence on the other end. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the phone rang. His name appeared on the screen. For a moment, I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to answer, afraid of what I might hear. But I needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I picked up the call. Mom. His voice sounded uncertain, almost cautious. Please don't be upset. Those words alone told me everything. My chest tightened as I struggled to keep my voice steady. You took it? I asked, barely above a whisper. There was a brief silence before he answered. We needed it, he said. The simplicity of his response felt like a knife. No explanation, no apology, just a statement, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. You already asked me, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. And I told you I would think about it. We were going to tell you, he replied quickly, almost defensively. But you didn't, I shot back. You went into my account and took it without my permission. Another silence followed, heavier this time. Then he said something that shattered whatever remained of my composure. It's basically our money anyway, we're your family. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words echoed in my mind, louder with each repetition. Our money. As if my years of hard work, my sacrifices, my careful saving meant nothing. As if being family gave them the right to take whatever they wanted. I felt something inside me break, something deep and irreversible. I trusted you, I said finally, my voice trembling. We'll pay you back, he insisted, but his tone lacked conviction. I closed my eyes, taking a slow, steady breath. In that moment, I realized something painful but undeniable. This wasn't desperation. It was entitlement. And no matter what he said, no matter what promises he made, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never see that money again. That night, I didn't cry. Instead, I sat in silence, thinking about everything that had happened, everything that had led to this moment. The betrayal, the lies, the realization that the people I loved most could hurt me so deeply. But along with the pain, something else began to grow. Clarity. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of determination I hadn't felt in a long time. I got dressed, gathered my documents, and went straight to the bank. I explained everything, my voice calm and steady despite the storm inside me. They helped me secure my accounts, change my passwords, and ensure that no one else could access my money again. It felt strange, taking these steps against my own son. But it was necessary. After the bank, I visited a legal advisor. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed to protect myself. I needed boundaries. For the first time in my life, I chose myself over him. When my phone rang later that day, I looked at the screen. It was him. I let it ring. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for not answering. Days turned into weeks, and the calls kept coming. Sometimes it was my son, sometimes messages, long and filled with apologies, explanations, and promises that everything would be fixed. I read every word carefully, searching for sincerity, for some sign that he truly understood what he had done. But each message felt the same, focused on regret, yes, but not on responsibility. His wife never contacted me again. Not once. That silence spoke louder than anything she could have said. The house felt different now. Quieter, but not in a lonely way. It was a calm I hadn't realized I had been missing. There was no tension, no unspoken discomfort, no feeling of being watched or evaluated. Just peace. I began to see things more clearly. That dinner hadn't just been a family gathering. It had been a turning point. A moment where everything hidden had come to light. I had invited them with love, hoping to reconnect, to rebuild what I thought was still there. But what I discovered instead was the truth. Trust, once broken, changes everything. And love, without respect, isn't truly love at all. I still thought about my son, of course. That doesn't disappear overnight. But the blind trust one once had was gone, replaced by something more grounded, more cautious. I didn't know what the future would bring. Maybe one day, things would change. Maybe he would understand the depth of what he had done. Or maybe he wouldn't. But one thing was certain. I would never ignore the truth again. Because sometimes, the hardest lesson isn't losing money. It's realizing that the people you trusted most felt entitled to take it from you, and believing they had every right to do so.